Have you ever found yourself saying yes when your heart screamed no? Every time we shrink to avoid conflict or rejection, we trade our confidence for comfort and lose a piece of ourselves. What if hiding your true voice is costing you more than you realize? I believe shrinking was safety, but it was slowly starving my confidence. The moment I stopped fading into the background, everything changed. My relationships, my self-worth, even my future. But reclaiming your voice comes with a price. Are you ready to pay it? If you're ready to reclaim your confidence, like and subscribe to join this journey with me. They always said confidence looked like standing tall, like boldness, like the loudest person in the room commanding attention with ease. And for years, I believed that meant I wasn't confident because I was quiet, because I listened more than I spoke, because I rehearsed every answer in my head before daring to raise my hand. But the truth is, confidence isn't always loud. Sometimes confidence is silent and hiding. Sometimes it wears a smile that doesn't quite reach your eyes. Sometimes it looks like saying yes to avoid disappointing someone, even when your whole body is screaming no. That's the kind of confidence I lived with for most of my life. The kind that was buried, hidden under layers of self-preservation, under the need to be liked, to be agreeable, to be the one who never caused waves. And I was praised for it. I was the easy one, the understanding one, the one who didn't take up too much space. But here's the part no one talks about. Every time you shrink yourself to fit someone else's comfort, something inside you pays the price. Your confidence doesn't vanish in a dramatic explosion. It erodes slowly, subtly, with every unspoken boundary, with every fake laugh, with every time you swallow your truth to keep someone else from being uncomfortable. You start to forget what your real voice even sounds like. Not the one you use to navigate conversations or deliver what people want to hear, but the one buried beneath the performance, the one you silenced the first time someone flinched at your honesty. We don't talk enough about the cost of people-pleasing. We dress it up in politeness, in kindness, in selflessness. We call it maturity, empathy, professionalism, and it's not that those things are wrong, it's that we confuse them with shrinking. We tell women especially that being small is noble, that being liked is more important than being whole, that it's safer not to shine too brightly, that if your truth makes someone else uncomfortable, maybe it's better left unsaid. But safety isn't the same as confidence. And I learned that too late. I didn't lose my confidence because I lacked it. I lost it because I gave it away in tiny pieces. Every time I chose comfort over truth, every time I dimmed myself to stay lovable, every time I believed that my value depended on how little I needed from others. And what I've realized is this: the world doesn't benefit from your shrinking. It doesn't need your silence. What it needs, what you need, is your full voice, spoken without apology. It's easy to dismiss people-pleasing as a harmless trait. We associate it with kindness, agreeableness, maybe even emotional intelligence. But beneath that surface lies a deeply rooted coping mechanism, one that often stems from childhood environments where love felt conditional, where acceptance had to be earned through compliance. Psychologists like Dr. Gabor Mate talk about this split between authenticity and attachment. As children, we'll always choose attachment because we need it to survive. So we learn to abandon parts of ourselves to maintain closeness. We adapt, we become agreeable, we avoid conflict. And over time, that adaptation becomes identity. By adulthood, the need to be liked isn't a preference, it's a survival strategy. One study published in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology found that individuals with high levels of people-pleasing tendencies often struggle with low self-esteem and chronic anxiety, particularly in social settings. They report difficulty making decisions without external validation. Their self-concept becomes externally regulated. If others are pleased, then they are okay. If others are displeased, then something must be wrong with them. It's not just psychological. There are physical consequences. Chronic stress from emotional suppression has been linked to inflammation, poor sleep, and even increased risk of autoimmune disorders. The body keeps the score, as Bessel van der Kolk so powerfully argues. When your voice is silenced over and over again, your nervous system goes into survival mode. You might smile on the outside, but internally you're bracing for rejection, scanning for disapproval, constantly negotiating your worth. And society rewards this performance, especially in women. We call them low maintenance. Chill, not like the others. We praise them for never asking too much, never taking offense, never needing too much space. But what we're really praising is their silence, their self-erasure, their learned ability to regulate everyone else's emotions at the expense of their own. This conditioning is so widespread it becomes invisible. It's in the workplace, where speaking up is seen as being difficult. It's in friendships, where setting boundaries is interpreted as cold. It's in dating, where not being easygoing enough is seen as a red flag. So we adapt again. We make ourselves smaller, softer, less threatening, more likable. But likability is a moving target, and the more you chase it, the more lost you become. Until one day you don't recognize your own reflection. Until you realize you've become an echo of other people's expectations. And your confidence has quietly disappeared in the process. When the weight of pleasing everyone becomes too heavy, when the silence begins to ache louder than the fear of rejection, many of us look for a way out, but we often choose the wrong exit. Instead of turning inward to ask, what do I truly need? We look outward. We chase validation louder, harder, more desperately. We become perfectionists, overachievers, performers. Because if we can't be loved for who we are, maybe we can be loved for how impressive we seem. This is the toxic pivot. When shrinking no longer works, we don't grow, we perform. And performance is seductive. It's clapped for, promoted, rewarded. You show up earlier, work harder, say all the right things, wear the right mask, and people applaud. They call you strong, capable, unstoppable. But inside, you're still negotiating your worth through their reactions. You're still terrified of disappointing someone. You've just built a shinier prison to hide that fear. In a society addicted to hustle and image, this kind of performance is often mistaken for confidence. But it's not. It's still fear, just dressed better. True confidence isn't loud or perfect or polished. It's honest, it's present. It doesn't need to prove or persuade. It simply is. But that kind of confidence can't grow where shame is still in charge. And shame is clever. It whispers that your worth is conditional, that you have to earn love by sacrificing your truth, that saying no makes you selfish, that asking for what you need is too much. So we obey, we contort, we earn our place at tables we were never meant to sit at, tables where being our full selves would get us asked to leave. The most dangerous part is how familiar it starts to feel. You get so good at reading the room, managing other people's comfort, editing yourself before you even speak, that it doesn't feel like self-abandonment anymore. It feels like maturity, like professionalism, like emotional intelligence. But it's none of those things. It's just a mask, a beautiful, brittle mask held together by fear. I know this because I wore that mask for years. I became who they wanted. I polished every word, smiled through discomfort, apologized for existing too loudly. And they loved me for it. But it wasn't me they loved. It was the version of me that didn't make them uncomfortable. And the longer I lived in that performance, the more disconnected I became from the girl underneath, the one who had opinions, needs, desires, a voice. So what do we do when we realize the performance isn't confidence? It's camouflage? When we see that our survival strategy is actually starving us of joy, of connection, of self, that's when the real work begins. The turning point wasn't loud. It didn't come with a grand revelation or a dramatic unraveling. It came quietly, like most truths do. I was sitting in a coffee shop in Portland. Just another day, just another latte, and I overheard a woman at the next table say something that pierced straight through me. She said, I realized I was being loyal to who I had to be, not to who I actually am. And for some reason, my body froze. My breath caught in my chest like it had been waiting to exhale for years. That sentence cracked something open, because I had been loyal too, to an identity I didn't choose, to a persona I had crafted carefully over years of avoiding conflict and chasing approval. and I had mistaken that loyalty for strength. But it wasn't. It was fear in disguise. Fear of being too much, fear of being rejected, fear of being truly seen, and then left. That day, I began to understand something I now call self-fidelity, the radical act of staying true to yourself, not to your performance, not to your past, not to the expectations placed on you, but to your real, unpolished, evolving self. It's not confidence in the traditional sense. It's not about walking into a room like you own it. It's about walking into yourself like you finally came home. Self-fidelity asks harder questions. Not, what will they think of me? But, am I betraying myself right now? Not, will they still love me if I say this? But, can I still love me if I don't? It's less about being bold and more about being honest. Less about pushing forward and more about coming back. And here's the shift. Confidence isn't something you build on top of yourself. It's something you uncover by removing everything that's not yours. The false yeses, the smile through it moments, the apologizing for simply existing. You don't have to add anything to become confident. You just have to stop subtracting yourself. I used to think reclaiming my confidence would look like a loud declaration, like finally speaking up in meetings, like wearing red lipstick and holding eye contact. And maybe, for some, it does. But for me, it looked like whispering no when everything in me wanted to scream it. It looked like sitting in the discomfort of someone's disapproval and realizing I didn't die. It looked like choosing truth over comfort, again and again until it felt like home. Self-fidelity isn't glamorous. It doesn't get applause, but it is freedom. It is the quiet return to the parts of you you thought you had to hide. It's the courage to say, this is who I am, even if your voice shakes, especially if your voice shakes. The world sells us a version of confidence that looks good in photos, slick, effortless, always camera ready. We're told that confidence wears heels without stumbling, speaks without hesitation, and never second guesses. It's the influencer who never breaks eye contact, the executive who commands the room with ease, the woman who always knows what to say and never seems to care what anyone else thinks. And if that's the standard, no wonder so many of us believe we don't have it. But that's not real. That's confidence packaged for consumption. That's performance wrapped in polish. Because real confidence, the kind that's rooted, not rehearsed, looks different. It's messier. It wobbles, it shakes. It's saying something honest and then sitting in the vulnerability of not knowing how it will land. It's walking away from something that doesn't honor you, even if your knees tremble the whole way home. It's making choices your past self would never believe you had the strength to make. The stereotype is clean and convenient. It's marketable. But the reality? The reality is that confidence often grows in private, in silence, in the aftermath of a hard decision that no one else clapped for. It's the quiet, knowing that you no longer need to disappear to belong, that your presence, just as it is not too much. We live in a culture that confuses confidence with charisma, but they're not the same. Charisma can dazzle a crowd. Confidence can sit in a room alone and not crumble. Charisma thrives on applause. Confidence doesn't ask for permission. One is loud, the other is anchored. I used to chase the stereotype. I thought, if I could just master their version, be the fun one, the pretty one, the chill one, I'd finally feel it. But the more I performed, the more disconnected I became. I was winning their approval and losing myself. Because confidence built on being liked is fragile. It depends on the room. It shifts with the wind. But the kind of confidence I've started to find, it doesn't need a stage. It lives in my number. It lives in my silence. It lives in the moments I choose myself. Not because it's easy, but because it's true. That kind of confidence doesn't come from becoming someone else. It comes from unbecoming everything you were told you had to be. So when you see those glossy images, those perfect sound bites, those curated versions of confident women, pause. Ask yourself, is this what it looks like? Or just what we've been told it's supposed to look like? Because somewhere in that gap is your truth waiting to be reclaimed. There was a version of me that most people loved. She was agreeable, soft-spoken, eager to help, and always available. She replied with, "No problem," even when it was. She laughed when she felt like crying. She stayed late. She forgave easily. She never asked for anything that might inconvenience someone else. People praised her constantly for being so easy to be around, for being the nicest person, for never making things complicated. And I clung to that praise like a lifeline because I had no idea who I was without it. That version of me lived in Boston for a long time. She worked in marketing, she showed up early, stayed quiet in meetings, over-delivered on every task, and accepted every extra responsibility with a smile. She dated men who didn't see her, tolerated friends who constantly crossed her boundaries, and made herself small in rooms where she had every right to take up space. And at the time, I thought I was being strong. I thought I was being kind. But the truth was I was scared, terrified of being disliked, terrified of being misunderstood, terrified of showing up fully and being told that it wasn't enough, or worse, that it was too much. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday. I was in a meeting with my manager, who casually assigned me someone else's work because I knew you'd say yes. He said it with a laugh, a compliment almost, but something in me snapped. Not loudly, just quietly, like a thread had been pulled too tight for too long and finally gave way. I didn't yell. I didn't even push back. But I went home that night, stared at myself in the mirror, and realized I didn't like the person looking back. Not because she wasn't good, but because she was invisible, even to herself. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote down how I actually felt. Not what I was supposed to feel, not what was safe to admit, just the truth. Anger, resentment, exhaustion, grief. I sat with that truth like it was an old friend I had ghosted. And in that silence, something shifted. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what healing would look like. But I knew I couldn't go back to pretending. Over the next year, I started making small changes. I said no, awkwardly at first. I let messages sit unread without guilt. I stopped saying I'm sorry when I hadn't done anything wrong. I spoke up in meetings, even when my voice shook. I told a man I was dating that I wasn't happy, and I didn't backpedal when he got uncomfortable. And slowly, piece by piece, I started coming back to myself. Not the perfect version, not the polished one, just me, flawed, feeling, real. And in that realness, I found something I never got from all those years of performing: peace. The truth is, confidence isn't built in front of an audience. It's reclaimed in private moments, the ones no one else sees. The moments when you choose your truth, even when no one's watching, even when it costs you something, especially then. Because confidence isn't a mood, it's a practice. It's not something you wait to feel before acting. It's something you embody by choosing yourself over and over, until the choosing becomes your nature. The concept that anchored me through it all was simple but radical. Every time I choose myself, I rebuild trust with me, not with others, not with the image I used to protect, with me. And that self-trust, over time, becomes unshakable. It becomes the foundation on which real confidence is built. Not loud or flashy, but solid, quiet, steady. So what does that look like in practice? Sometimes it's saying I need time to think, instead of rushing to give the perfect response. Sometimes it's walking away from a conversation that crosses your boundaries, even if it makes things awkward. Sometimes it's deleting the message you typed out to justify yourself, because you realize you don't owe an explanation for simply being honest. Sometimes it's letting someone be disappointed in you and choosing not to rescue them from that feeling. It's waking up and asking, what would honoring myself look like today? And then doing your best to answer with action. Not perfectly, just honestly. It's replacing am I doing enough with am I being true? It's holding space for discomfort without collapsing. It's understanding that every time you abandon yourself to keep the peace externally, you create war internally. You don't need to announce your return to yourself. You don't need to post about your boundaries or prove you've changed. Confidence doesn't demand proof. It reveals itself in your posture, in your silence, in your no, that no longer comes with a performance. It's in the space between stimulus and response, where you now pause, breathe, and choose not to shrink. I won't lie and say it's easy. Choosing yourself often feels like loss at first. The loss of approval, of comfort, of being the version of you others have come to expect. But what grows in that empty space is something far more powerful. A self that is no longer negotiable. A self that no longer seeks permission to exist. A self that knows she is allowed to take up space. Not because she's earned it, but because she already belongs here. And once you've tasted that kind of freedom, it's nearly impossible to go back. Have you ever traded your truth for peace? Drop a candle in the comments if you've ever silenced yourself just to be accepted. Let's talk about it. Even after we understand the concept, even after we see the cost of shrinking, even after we make the brave decision to start choosing ourselves, it's still hard. Because the real battle isn't external. It's not just about the people we fear disappointing or the roles we've been cast into. It's about the voice inside our own head, the one that's been shaped by years of conditioning, by memories we don't even realize shaped us, by the first moment we were punished, subtly or not, for simply being real. That voice doesn't disappear just because you've decided to change. It gets louder at first. It tells you you're being selfish, dramatic, difficult. It reminds you of every time you were punished for speaking up. It brings up the faces of people who sighed when you had needs, who rolled their eyes when you drew boundaries, who walked away when you stopped shrinking. And that voice is persuasive because it sounds like survival. It sounds like what kept you safe. For me, the hardest part wasn't saying no. It was sitting in the guilt afterward. Guilt that had nothing to do with right or wrong and everything to do with habit. I had become so used to measuring my worth by how comfortable I made others the discomfort, even healthy, necessary discomfort, felt like failure. My nervous system didn't know the difference between disappointing someone and being in danger. It all registered as risk. So the work, really, was retraining my body to understand that telling the truth was no longer a threat, that I wasn't that little girl anymore, begging for approval with good behavior, that I could disappoint someone and still be safe, that I could be misunderstood and still be whole, that I could feel guilt and not be wrong. This is where so many of us get stuck, not because we don't know better, but because healing doesn't move at the speed of insight. It moves at the speed of trust. And trust, when you've spent your life outsourcing it, takes time to rebuild, especially with yourself. So we have to practice. We have to sit in the discomfort and breathe. We have to remind ourselves, this is what it feels like to grow. This is what it feels like to come home to yourself after years of exile. It's tender, it's awkward, it's raw, but it's also real. And little by little, your body learns the truth your heart already knew. You were never too much. You were simply taught to believe that less of you was easier to love. Nowhere does the cost of shrinking show up more painfully than in our relationships. Because relationships are mirrors. They reflect back not only who we are, but who we believe we're allowed to be. And when you've spent your life people-pleasing, you don't enter relationships as a whole person. You enter as a curated version of yourself, a version designed to be digestible, non-threatening, pleasant. You shape-shift without realizing it. You sense what they want and you become it. Not because you're manipulative, but because you've been trained to believe that love is something you earn by disappearing. I've lost myself in relationships more times than I can count. Romantically, platonically, even professionally. I've swallowed my preferences to keep the peace. I've downplayed my emotions so I wouldn't seem too much. I've tolerated disrespect and called it understanding. And the tragedy is, I thought I was being loving. I thought that's what a good partner, a good friend, a good woman did. I didn't know that real love doesn't require your erasure, that the people who truly love you want all of you, even the parts that say no, even the parts that set limits, even the parts that aren't always agreeable. When I started practicing self-fidelity in relationships, things got harder before they got better. I lost people. Some slowly drifted, some left loudly, some made me feel like I was the problem. And for a while, I believed them. Because when your entire sense of identity is built around being easy to love, asserting your truth feels like a betrayal, not just to them, but to the story you've been living in. But over time, something shifted. The people who stayed, the ones who welcomed the full version of me, helped me realize I'd never truly been seen before. I had been liked, adored even, but never fully known. And being known, truly known, is a different kind of intimacy. It's deeper, riskier, but it's also where real connection lives. Now, I listen differently. I speak differently. I enter rooms not with the question, how can I be what they want? But can I be who I am here, and will that be enough? And if the answer is no, I know that it's not rejection. It's redirection. It's protection. It's the wisdom of a self that no longer begs for crumbs because she's learned she deserves a seat at the full table. Because love without authenticity isn't love, it's approval. And approval fades the moment you stop performing. But real love, real connection, that begins the moment you stop shrinking. So now comes the part that's both the hardest and the most honest. The choice to begin again, to rewrite the patterns, not with grand gestures, but with small rebellions against your own silence. Because confidence, true, sustainable confidence, is not something you wait to feel. It's something you do. You act your way into remembering who you are. And that begins with behavior, with daily deliberate choices that say, I trust myself enough to be seen. It starts when you pause before saying yes and ask yourself, do I really want this? It starts when you let yourself feel the urge to explain or justify, and then don't. It starts when you say, I'm not available for that, and resist the impulse to cushion it with apology. These aren't just phrases. They're self-affirmations disguised as boundaries. Sometimes it looks like walking out of a conversation where your worth is being negotiated. Sometimes it looks like letting someone misunderstand you without scrambling to correct the narrative. Sometimes it's as small as ordering what you want at dinner without scanning the table first. Sometimes it's closing your laptop at 6 p.m. because you promised yourself rest. And this time, you mean it. You don't need to become someone new to reclaim your confidence. You just need to stop betraying the person you've always been. She's still there, under the compliance, under the carefulness, under the years of trying to be palatable. She's waiting for you to say, I see you, I'm coming back. You can begin today, not tomorrow, not when it's more convenient, not when it feels easier, today, with one honest sentence, with one firm boundary, with one moment of stillness where you let your truth rise without shutting it down. That's how you stop shrinking. That's how you rebuild. And you won't be perfect. You'll shrink again. You'll backpedal. You'll apologize when you don't need to. That's okay. The goal isn't perfection. It's fidelity. Am I showing up as myself more today than I did yesterday? That's the measure. Because every time you honor your truth, even in a whisper, you send a signal to the world and to yourself that you are no longer for sale, no longer up for negotiation. You are not a mirror for other people's comfort. You are a voice, a body, a life, and you belong to yourself first. That's the kind of confidence that doesn't just change how you move. It changes who you are allowed to become. What I gained when I stopped shrinking wasn't applause. It wasn't attention. It wasn't a louder voice or a bigger stage. It was something quieter, more sacred. I gained access to myself. I stopped abandoning the parts of me that had waited years to be chosen, not by the world, but by me. And in that choosing, I began to feel whole again. I started laughing without checking the room. I rested without guilt. I disagreed without trembling. I cried without shame. I showed up to conversations without rehearsing. And in those simple moments, I met a version of myself I had been missing. Not a better version, just an honest one. One who didn't perform for acceptance, who didn't vanish in proximity to others, who didn't see love as something to be earned through smallness. And with that came a quiet joy. The joy of knowing I can trust myself to speak even when my voice shakes. the joy of hearing my own no and honoring it, the joy of being in relationships where I am seen not for what I provide, but for who I am when I'm not trying. This is the gift of confidence reclaimed. Not louder, but freer. Not bolder, but truer. Not bigger, but finally, enough. And if you're wondering where to begin, if you've spent so long disappearing that you're not sure what your full self even sounds like anymore, here's the beginning. Come back. You don't have to know what to say yet. You don't have to be graceful. Just come back. Come back to the voice you muted, to the need you ignored, to the part of you that always knew shrinking wasn't the way. Come back and listen. Because here's what no one tells you. Your confidence was never gone. It was buried, under fear, under performance, under the belief that being loved meant being less. But the truth is, the most magnetic thing about you, the thing that draws in the people, the purpose, the peace you've been craving, is not your perfection. It's your presence. And next time we'll talk about what happens when your presence becomes undeniable, when you not only reclaim your voice, but learn to use it to shape the world around you. If this spoke to you, subscribe and share with someone who needs to hear this today.